Dieter, by any chance?
I did, and
Okay.
so
All right. Welcome, everybody. Hey, Captain Ron here, and it's Tuesday night. What's that old movie? If it's Tuesday, it must be Belgium. That was an aviation theme, and only Diane and I are probably old enough
The only one's old enough to remember that one.
means. Yeah, Eric was still a young whippersnapper at that stage when that movie came out. So anyway, welcome tonight. Another episode of Clear for Takeoff Live, and we have quite a extensive layout here. We're gonna do what I call a mini course. We're gonna talk about the main elements that you have to undergo in order to overcome a fear of flying. We're going to talk about an accident that's in the news, and we're going to welcome. We actually had some of the viewers on last week from Stephanie Berner's Fear of Flying It's Fear Flying group, I think, isn't it? The name of that, Dieter? Do you remember that?
it's a Fear of Flying support group. Yeah, it's a very active Facebook group.
And so Stephanie's has been interfacing with Dieter and I for some time now, and she's amassed quite a group of followers in and of herself. And so we wanted to support her and the group out there. And we didn't get to some of the questions from last week, so we've got them here. And just before we got going tonight here, Stephanie messaged me and said that she that there was a lot of interest in the China East China Airlines, China East Airline.
Alphabetical order.
737-800 crash. So we're going to talk about that as well. So we got a little question there. If you can flash that question up there, Dieter, we'll give that out there.
And hi,
of course, we always.
On that slideshow, we don't have a question here. So if you
okay, can you read it? Can you
sorry?
see it? Can you see the question?
I cannot. No.
Okay, so here's the question, and what I'd like you to do is if you have an answer to it, put it in the remarks there. So if you're not familiar with the crash, last week an East China Airlines Boeing 737-800, not a Max, but an 800, crashed after a kind of an unusual maneuver, which Eric and I interpreted pretty much as a stall, and the airplane crashed in a steep dive, which always conjures up the worst that you could imagine as a fearful flyer, and that is, people just no visible remains and the airplane, in complete destruction, all that. And unfortunately, that's what dominates your mind's eye. But the reality is, looking at a study that they did years ago of 30,000 of crashes that had a total of 30,000 injuries or people involved in it, only 90 or only 5% of the people were fatal. So rarely does a crash have this magnitude where all the survivors or where there are no survivors, and unfortunately this is one of them. And when you look back, the last two of the 737 Max crashes, they were both without survivors. But the reality is we've gone for 20 years in the U.S. without having a major aircraft accident, and flight anxiety is not based on anything but the illusion of control, in that, most people think that they're safer in their car. At least their elephant brain would tell them that, when the reality is you're far more likely to get injured in a car crash. So regarding that crash, if you have seen it in the news, and if it's triggered some anxiety in you, what's the story you tell yourself about that crash? And that's really open. Could be anything from I shouldn't get on an airplane to this is what I think happened. This is what I read in the news. And Eric and I will then add that into a discussion of what we know so far from that crash. And we're going to, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about kind of a mini course of overcoming your fear of flying, and then we'll have other questions that came in from Stephanie's group. So put your answers in the remarks there, and give us your take on what that does. So So the first thing I want to talk about a little bit is what does it mean to overcome your fear of flying? And there's some assumptions that define you as fearful flyers. And these are summarized over the 35 years that I've been gathering data. At the top of the list is takeoff is dangerous, followed by turbulence is dangerous, followed by flying over water for extended periods of time is dangerous. So those are three things that fall into the same category where people think that there's something inherently dangerous about that. And that's the reason that they manifest a lot of fear. The fourth one is one that kind of ignores the mechanical part of that. And it's that you won't be able to cope with your own emotions or risk attracting unwanted attention or becoming embarrassed by your nervousness. And so we have, on the one hand, people that are worried about the mechanical integrity of the airplane and causing a problem that would result in a crash. And on the other hand, we have people that are just worried about their own airworthiness, if you will. And the reality of it is that nowadays, matter of fact, we had the Boston class on, I think, a couple of weeks ago, and they surveyed every one of all the people there. And I think 90% of them, all but one person, I believe, was more worried about them losing their composure and control than they were about something mechanically happen. And that's been a trend that I've noticed over the 35 years that's continued to increase. And regarding that fear, let me assure you that you're not going to lose your stuff. Okay, it just doesn't happen. You might feel like that on the inside, and it's very deceiving, because most people think that the way they feel on the inside, it does two things. One, it's sure to give them away to people around them, and the second thing is that anything that would feel so miserably inside of them, they're sure that it has to manifest in some real jeopardy, and that just isn't the case. So one of the things that I've come to want to reemphasize recently in doing so many flights with people is that, well, fear of flying, your feelings are real. You know, we have an acronym, FEAR, that we call false experience appearing real. Okay, and it's true in its essence, but some people get the impression that we're saying that your fear or anxiety produced when you think about flying or actually fly is not real. That's far from the truth. You know as well as I do that is totally real to you. Okay, and it's the way the body reports what it perceives as threats or real threats. And the thing I would add to that perception of threat is another thing that we haven't talked as much about in the past is the feelings of emotional distress, emotional pain, because that's another aspect of the way the amygdala process that. When I talk to people initially, I talk about the physiology of fear. And I use a smoke detector as an analogy. And I asked them, what's a smoke detector do? And of course, the answer is it detects smoke. Some people say it detects fire, but it really doesn't. It detects smoke. And in order to be a useful function, you don't not only have to have something to detect the smoke, but you also have to have some way of grabbing the attention of human beings who might be victim to some fire or something related to the smoke. And so it sounds an alarm. It has an audible, a very distinctive alarm, so that you won't hopefully confuse that with anything else in the house. We don't play Beethoven's Fifth. We don't play your oldies but goodies album on that. We play an alarm, and once it does that, and you can connect with it, it grabs your attention. And without that, like I said, it'd be useless. The problem with the smoke detector is that it can't tell the difference between burnt toast or a raging fire. So you have to discern whether whether and what kind of attention and response it warrants. We have a smoke detector equivalent in our brain. It's called the amygdala. It's two little almond-shaped, almond-sized parts of the brain, about the size of the tip of your index finger. Two of them being key, because Mother Nature must have thought they were so important. She gave us two of them, and they're just inside of your ears, and they occupy a small area in there, and they are part of the limbic system. So they're part of the most primitive warning system that we have as human beings, and they've been around for a long time. And their primary purpose is to signify or warn you when you're in some level of emotional arousal. Okay. And I say that in that way because it can be positive as well as negative. So that same part of the brain that gets activated can get activated over your first love, the first time you saw your first love, birthday parties, other emotional events. But its primary purpose and its overwhelming bias is towards negative events, because that's what Mother Nature gave us to let us know that something was rotten in Denmark and we needed to pay attention. And so, as I mentioned, we have a negative bias. So we're far more likely, some people estimate as high as 13-1 to work off of a negative trigger than a positive one. And as a fearful flyer, that's how true that is. So the amygdala's role is to detect danger, and I say the perception of danger, because it doesn't matter whether it's a grizzly bear staring you in the face outside of your campsite waking up in the morning, or it's the after effects of the grizzly bear when you survive it and get back home after the weekend ends. And it sounds alarm, and the main difference between a smoke alarm and the amygdala, our brain's smoke alarm, is it uses chemistry and biology to alert you, which is a very effective and much to your dismay, overwhelming way of getting your attention. And once it gets activated, it hijacks your attention and it won't let go. And so the whole goal of overcoming your fear of flying and what we work on and help people with most is how do you not prevent it from getting hijacked, because you're very unlikely to ever be able to overcome that. It is going to work until you die. But what we try to teach people is, once you do, first of all, to recognize when it's been hijacked, verbalize the fact that it's been hijacked, and then come up with a way to move your attention back under your control. Because after all, the difference between you and myself or Diane or Eric sitting on an airplane next to each other is what we are thinking. You're thinking about how badly you feel. Why did you think about it? Why did you consent to do this? What impossible, way is this going to benefit you? Whereas the three of us, or me in particular, I'll speak for myself, I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat the next time I get a chance. So,
Ron, did you just say that amygdala has a 13-1 bias towards being?
Yeah, I've seen people, 5-1, 13-1. It depends on who you're reading.
And you know who knows that really, really well?
Who?
Amazon. Amazon has in their algorithm, for one negative review, and negative being anything 4 stars or less, it takes about 13 positive reviews in order to reestablish trust. So this is a very practical thing in everyday life, and all of us read reviews and look at the stars, and so it kind of gives you a good idea of how that plays out in our everyday life.
I was just going to say that's a good reason.
That Amazon philosophy, they do it in other ways too. Scarcity. Act now. If you don't do this within 3, and all marketers do that, and we've been even guilty of doing that if somebody would press us on that. But the perception of scarcity is a negative one. When I was in high school, I got to go to visit the government, and we had an interview with one of my state senators at the time, and he pointed out that if they get one letter of positive or negative, but primarily negative, criticism from a taxpayer, and it has merit to it, they count that as 50,000 people. Now that's probably higher than that now. So that's how they evaluate, because they know that if that person took the time and effort to do that, there were probably 50,000 other people who felt the same way, but weren't gonna verbalize it.
Well, we scare people with the ticket prices on the flying weekends, but we're not lying about that. They do only go one way.
Yeah.
Way.
Yeah. There you go. And speaking of ticket prices, if we found, or I have, since I've been, flying more with Fearful Flyers, Southwest Airlines, the closer you get to flying, the more they jack up the price. And because the theory is they think that if you go late rather than early, that you probably have to fly. And then sometimes they'll jack it up on a Friday and then lower it again on a Tuesday. So there's a variety of ways that they take advantage of that. But in any case, the problem with our amygdala or our smoke detector, not unlike a real smoke detector, is that we can't tell the difference between perceived and real threats as well. So that's a continual challenge for people overcoming it. And there's 4 steps that lead to it that you must understand before you can overcome your fear of flying. And they are the keys to overcoming your fear of flying, of which there are 3. So the first step is you have to understand the keys to overcoming your fear of flying, which is 1, you have to identify your triggers. What's a trigger? It's something that activates your smoke detector. So we ask people to first identify their triggers. Then we ask them to recognize the story or identify the story that they attach to that trigger. That's why we asked the question tonight: what stories do you find yourself telling yourself regarding the East China Airlines crash? And then the last thing is, once you identify the trigger, once you recognize the story, now you can become your own author and rewrite the story in your life. And as a matter of fact, in the Clear for Takeoff 201 course that we do, that's one of the first activities that we assign to people, is write a story about your fear. Okay, so that's the first step of the 4 steps of understanding. The second one is we talk about the biology of fear. You've got to understand how the biology of fear works and how you can rewire your brain to change the way you think. The third step is understanding the essential elements of airworthiness. Dieter and I had Dieter listened to me for a long time, and he came up with this. I said, there's 2 things. One, you have to be confident in the airworthiness of the airplane, and the other one, you have to be confident in the airworthiness of your own person. And so Dieter helped me put together a whole list of airworthiness components that we have in the book. And the last thing is to talk about turbulence busting myths and building confidence in yourself. So those are 4 steps. The keys to understanding your fear of flying, mainly the triggers, stories you tell yourself, and rewriting your story. And then the other 3: biology of fear, how you can rewire your brain, the essential elements of airworthiness, why flying is actually safer than driving to the grocery store. And then the last one is turbulence busting myths and building confidence in yourself. And we pride ourselves in giving people, let's just say there are 10 things that you have to master to overcome your fear of flying. There are people out there, somewhat nefarious, if I do say so myself, that would give you, the first 6 or 7 or so, and then hold 7 and 8 in their pocket. Sort of like if you've ever put a puzzle together with people, and if you're the one that, like Ron, like I do, you put the 1 piece in your pocket, and then you can come back when there's 1 piece left and you can fill in the piece. We don't do that. We're going to give you all 10 of the steps that it takes to overcome your fear of flying. And we're going to do it at a rate, not like sometimes people have accused me of giving them a drink with a fire hose, but at a rate you can assimilate it. So all of this is what's tantamount to or imperative that you understand if you have a fear, and if you have not considered taking the Clear for Takeoff 201 global online course with us. We really hope that you'll do that, and we're going to be coming out with a relaunch here in the next week or so in order to spread that. And we've changed the nature of the course from a more traditional start with day 1, go to day 30 or whatever. Now it's going to be open enrollment so that you can learn on demand, and we'll have at least 1 monthly webinar as long as you're a member. And when you purchase the course, you get not just a month or so, you get a 90-day window from the day that you register in order to have access to that course. And we're continually adding information. So we have people that you may have seen over the last couple of weeks on the show who have actually flown with us in Phoenix here, in Boston, and just a couple of weeks ago in Burbank, that have taken the course, and you'll see them on the follow-on and the webinars and stuff as well. So we want an active mix of people who are new to the program and people who have gone through to share their experience, because a big part of this whole thing is the social connection. And I've often advertised, and I had a number of people to bear witness to that in the last flight that we took out of Burbank, and that is they really got it. it's going to fly with a group of people, of like-minded people, and their attitude and their awareness completely changes from where it was before, where they go to the airport and they can't imagine, what it's like to be there, feel isolated and worry about what others are thinking of them. But to see people that they've met online and then connect with them, and you would think that we were the only ones on the airplane by the time you watched us go through these flights. It's an amazing transformation. I've seen it for the last 35 years I've been doing this, and it seems to get stronger all the time. So all right.
Speaking of the social connection, let me just read, or at least summarize, some of the comments of the stories that people are wondering or telling themselves. So it's hard to believe that a plane that has that great of a service record, can malfunction all by itself. So that's one story. Another story is that it's the culture that may have played a role in the pilots maybe not being able to, heed guidance or communicate well enough in order to, avert whatever was happening. And then maintenance service was one of the other things. And then I think somebody even said that they don't have a very good safety record. Delta Airlines severed relationships with China East in the 90s, so it's maybe a cultural problem again. So that's, in general, those are the three main arcs or story arcs. I'm gonna say I got another message earlier that that story was basically that the pilot, was suicidal or had other ideas and ditched themselves. So these are all these stories, and I know they recovered the flight data recorders. So ultimately, we'll be able to piece together what actually happened. But that's what's on the chat so far.
Okay, so one of the most popular all-time webinars that I've ever done, we're gonna replicate in the 201 course this next month, and that's going to be why airplanes crash. And you might think, why the hell would I want to talk about crashes? Because the reason that we are so safe as an industry, the safest way to travel there is because of the diligence. You think CSI is impressive on the TV shows? We've been doing CSI and aircraft investigation for all of my career. And then it's amazing what we learn from those things. And I want to just, on the tail end of what Dieter talked about, the speculation about maintenance and all these things based on the past. I don't know about whether Eric will back me up on this, but one of the things we love to do as pilots is we love to second guess Monday morning quarterback our peers that get into trouble in an airplane, whether it's accidents or incidents. And I would say 99.9% of the time, what I was so convinced of in my mind wasn't it.
Give me 15 seconds, Ron. Yes, that's absolutely true. There's no more fun than dirty laundry with your peers at work. However, as Dieter mentioned, they did now recover the flight data recorder, the FDR. They had the cockpit voice recorder, and the flight data recorder is relatively undamaged, was buried 1.5 meters of the ground vertically and not bent. So they will have, with the information off of both of those, it will take a while for the whole investigation to be done, but it will be almost inevitable that somebody who is not authorized to speak but wants to tell us anyway will leak out some stuff when they get into that. And with both those things, that will be an extreme amount of hard evidence, and we'll be able to stop guessing.
Okay. So again, I would like you to go deeper out there and invite you to go deeper. Is what's the story you tell yourself? Yeah, you can make up excuses for why it crashed and all that, but I want to know why it occupies that part of your brain. Okay, the most common one would be it validates you saying, yeah, see, I told you fear of flying is dangerous, or flying is dangerous. That's what we're after. That's how you're going to get over it, because you have a decision. Airplanes are always going to crash. You have a decision whether you're going to fly or not. And if you use the likelihood of an accident or an incident in aviation as your only criteria, you could not get in your car and drive to the grocery store. You just can't do it if you're going to be consistent. And it speaks to what I talked about earlier. There's an illusion of safety in driving your car. You think because you're behind the wheel, you think because you can pull over to the side of the road and get out. You don't do that when you're being T-boned in the middle of an intersection, okay? You literally couldn't see it coming there. So let's talk about some of address the questions that came in over the last week and a half or so, particularly from Stephanie's group. And I really want to thank Stephanie again in the group for contributing these things, because this is really why we're here. We're here in this live format so that we can ask you or answer your questions in real time. And the first one says, when it's turbulent, can pilots try to get out of it by going higher or lower or changing flight path on their own? Or do they have to stick with the flight plan or request permission? Yes, yes, and yes. Eric, you want to talk about that a little bit? So do you, when you're sitting in turbulence, do you notice it, Eric, or are you brain dead like most of our listeners would think you are?
No, maybe we don't have the fear response they do, but our aggravation response is 1,000 times what theirs is. And if they went up and put their ear to the cockpit door, they would hear a stream of F-bombs while we were trying to straighten out whether we could go laterally, up, down, and everybody else is going to be trying to do that. Move the airplane to the limit of our ability to get out of it. We're going to be working that right away to get out of that, because we don't want to sit in that any more than they do. We absolutely don't want to be there.
And I don't want to be in it either.
Exactly. Now, if you get hurt.
Talk about being annoying, because that's what we always talk about, that it's not nerve-wracking, it's just annoying. For us, we can't do our service and it's boring, and the passengers would like their beverages and we want to take care of them, and we can't because we're bouncing around, and then sometimes we, like today, and right now you can see I'm not at home. I'm in Houston, Texas. I'm on the last night of a 3-day trip, home tomorrow. But we had to go around a storm and it took longer. And then we got to where we were going late and we had passengers who missed their connections. So for us, as for with Ron and Eric, the turbulence is just annoying, and it just sometimes just wrecks our day from a convenience or that kind of standpoint, not from any kind of nerve-wracking standpoint. So
congratulations for your 3-year anniversary. What was it, last week, Diane?
Okay. Sunday. What's today? The 29th? It was Sunday, 3 years. I've been flying for 3 years on Sunday.
Have you ever been surprised by turbulence?
Have I?
Yeah.
Any of us?
You? What? Oh, yeah. You know, you're minding your own business, you're serving, and all of a sudden you get a big bill. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
If I were looking at your face, would I see
a passenger one time? I almost landed in some guy's lap. So
in that moment, if I were looking at your face, would I see a look of amazement?
Probably annoyed. Well, maybe amazement, but more annoyance.
Should I conclude from that look of amazement that you're scared to death?
Oh,
and it's
I hope not.
So that's my point.
Right.
People look to the flight attendants for cues. And so, you know, one of my favorite was with a client. I said, you know, when did your fear start? She said, I was on a Southwest flight. We had a sudden drop, and the flight attendant went to her knees right beside me, put her hand on the armrest and said, oh my God, we're going down. Okay. She's entitled to be just as startled as you are. All right. Now, she probably recovered, is probably still out there working today, but that's what happened. So Eric and I and Diane and Dieter, and no matter who you are, when you have an unexpected event in your life, it can be not only a drop in the airplane, it can be a loud noise. It can be having somebody throw something out that makes you think it's a snake. It can be fear of falling. All of those things, you will get startled. No human being is immune from that. And when you get startled, your anxiety takes a spike. And so mine may even go higher than yours, but mine drops off rather rapidly. Diane's drops off rather rapidly, as does Eric's and Dieter's, because they've been through it before. And now we're going to be back there bumping along the 1, 2, or 3 levels on our arousal scale, where you might get stuck up there, and that's the problem. So the story that you tell yourself is why you get stuck up there, and the way you rewrite the story is the way you get unstuck from that. Okay.
However, in Diane's defense, like they say about the chicken and the pig, who has more skin in the game for breakfast? Ron and I are strapped in and she's not, and neither one of us are going to have a 400-pound liquor cart land on us if things go badly.
Yeah, and that's really true. That is something that we are not, as flight attendants, afraid of. We are concerned. I use those terms very specifically, and that's why if it's going to be a little bit bouncy, the captain will call back to us and say, hey, listen, we're expecting a little bit of turbulence. This is where it is, maybe 3s and 4s as far as how severe it's going to be. We want you to stay seated in your jump seats, buckled up until we get through the worst of it or all of it. And so that's another thing that the passengers have to understand is that we do, as Eric said, we have a little bit more skin in the game because I'm up walking down the aisle. I've almost landed in a passenger's lap. One time the turbulence came on so suddenly, the captain didn't even give us a nice warm introduction like we're expecting some flight attendants, please take your seats. It was flight attendants, sit down. I mean, that was it. And so you sit and you worry about the cart. I was holding on to sitting strapped into a passenger seat, holding on to the coffee pot had scalding hot coffee to make sure that didn't fly around the airplane and land on somebody. So we have a little bit more going on there because we aren't strapped down if it hits and we're in the aisle. Yeah.
And a number of people have raised the issue that when they hear the captain come on with a sense of urgency in his or her voice and say, flight attendants, take your seat immediately, they think that must be the big one, Elizabeth, and everybody's going down. That's not true.
No,
it's just that they want no doubt in the flight attendant's mind that they should find a seat, including an empty one in the passenger row,
which is where I sat.
That's the best thing that they can do in short time.
Because and one other time it was imminent, very quick like that, and I squatted down I wasn't around the cart, but I squatted down in the aisle, holding on to a couple of armrests, and passengers on either side were holding on to me to keep me down. So wherever you can get down and safe and secure, that's what we do. Yeah.
We've talked about the fact that when you fly, you want to first identify yourself, board early, and meet the pilots. And you want to train the pilots. You do that in 2 ways. One is you tell them what you like when you go up there. And then when you get done, if they did something or made a PA that you liked, you tell them that. We're like monkeys. You give us a banana and we'll repeat the behavior. Okay. And one of the things that the last class in particular noticed, we had Captain Mike on last week, the Southwest pilot that happened to fly us up and back to from Burbank to Sacramento a couple weeks ago. And he had made a point of telling people, we got some turbulence coming up and I don't expect it to last very long, maybe a couple of minutes or something like that. And everybody in my group just loved that. So when you go flying the next time, if that's a concern to you and it makes you feel better, if you hear the pilot speculate on how long it might be, tell him, one of the pilots that I flew with even went so far as to estimate how long it would be. Okay. Do you guys do that? Okay. So you're training them, you're giving them ideas because they don't live in the same world that you do and Diane and Eric and Dieter and I do. Okay. A quick question about the Russian situation. This is from last week, and you may have heard a lot about the no-fly zone and all that. It says, with the current Russian situation, is it still safe to fly? I'm assuming that they're talking about in that airspace in and around the Ukraine. And I would say, no, not likely. And that's why if you look at a map from our buddies at Flight Radar 24 or whatever some of the things are, you will see no little dots over the Ukraine country and in that area because nobody is dumb enough to go flying through there. Okay, you may have forgotten right after the Malaysian 370 flight went down and disappeared. It was 6 months later that a group of rogue soldiers down there shot down an airliner, another Malaysian Air. So no, they don't do that. We coordinate that, and it's amazing even in this day and age how the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is a function of the United Nations, it's a a regulatory group or an advisor group run by the United Nations that all as far as I know, every airline in the world subscribes to, and they abide by that. So aviation safety has been kind of a protected part of the world, unless you do something really dumb like fly through the middle of an airspace like that.
And there's also little flight activity over Russia currently because of the back and forth, and Russia has, I think, closed their airports to a number of Western airlines, as a kind of like back and forth with Aeroflot, their airline being grounded. So, and I just wanna share that too. In 2020, when I actually did travel last, going to Thailand, there was a conflict between India and Pakistan.
Yeah.
And our original flight path would have, gone across there. And I remember the pilot coming on at the beginning of the flight, and he literally said, as a abundance of precaution, there isn't really anything, that we really at 40,000 feet have to worry about. But I just want to let you know that our company and, most airliners will, fly around, which is why there's an added hour and a half to our flight itinerary. And so I mean, really, in that case, you gotta believe that everybody wants to keep their crew, their equipment, and their passengers safe first, and so that's really not a problem. In that
exactly, and if you look, there's always conflicts going on in the world. So there's conflicts, and it affects the airspace and the way the airlines fly over them that you would never even be appraised of. One that I'm remembering is I taught international towards the end of my career, and I believe it's the island of Cyprus, which is divided into there's a Turkish side and a Greek side. Is that correct? And you go close to that airspace when you're going in and out of Tel Aviv. And one of the things about to this day, they do not talk to each other. There is no handoff from one control to the other. So you operate very, very uniquely. And there are the rules for flying in and around Cyprus over there. But we have to know those as pilots, and you don't. Here's a comment from somebody, which you can find in a group like Stephanie's group, or in a group like our Birds of a Feather. Someone wrote in there, I flew from the UK to Egypt 2 weeks ago, 0 issues. We don't fly near those countries, so there's we didn't fly near those problems. So not to worry about it. Okay.
Bob, give me 60 seconds.
Go.
Got one question, or maybe 90 seconds. One from Kim Stewart. Says that are with all these backup systems and everything is checked, why are there still accidents? And as we like to say, to err is human. There will always be accidents, and there will be extreme effort to eliminate the causes and eradicate them, but they will never be completely eradicated. And then she closes with this great line. She goes, boy, if there's a 1 in 2 million, then it must be my turn next. And I hate to say, you guys bring that up so frequently. What? No crashes for 50 years? Well, this year is going to be a really bad year. And that's not true. I mean, it just isn't. But I feel your pain, and you have a lot of like-minded friends here.
And we appreciate your arrogance, thinking that you are the 1 in 33.2 million.
That's special.
You'd have to be really special.
You just want to be on YouTube. You can't fool us.
Right.
The other thing I wanted to bring up was the Delta depressurization incident, which is a happy story. Day and a half ago, they were flying from Atlanta to Seattle, or if not from Atlanta, somewhere to Seattle, midway across the country, and they had a depressurization event caused by, we don't know what, but the pilots executed the procedure properly and descended fairly quickly to 10,000 feet. Masks were deployed. They landed uneventfully in Denver with no injuries. All per the book. One of the interesting statistic I saw was that their average descent rate down to 10,000 was only 4,000 feet per minute, which is a pretty decent rate of sinking. But if they wanted to, they easily could have made 6,000 to 8,000 feet per minute going down. They could have dove a lot harder. So it was a pretty tame descent. No one was injured. They were on the ground. Got on the ground, it was all fine, and they got to go to Torchy's Tacos in the Denver airport, which they don't have in Seattle, for no extra charge. So it ended very well.
Nobody, the airplane did not plummet. Nobody was hurt, but I guarantee you, somebody interviewed a passenger off of that airplane. Someone said, "Oh my God, I thought I was going to die."
Sure.
Why? Because it's out of the ordinary.
And
Okay?
that's why, please, when you're a passenger, please watch and listen to the safety demonstration, because putting the masks on is a huge part. And I can tell you, in virtually every single time I have done the safety demo as the forward flight attendant, some of my most attentive passengers are under the age of 1, because they're chewing on the passenger safety card and they're looking at me because I'm doing funny stuff in the front of the plane. So they're the only ones that, between the babies and the dogs, the service animals, they're the only ones that are really paying attention, but we would really like it if everybody did.
Here's a comment I want to point out that is really relevant here, and that is, someone wrote in, "My son had a 2-liter bottle of lemonade in his backpack, and you're limited to 3.3 ounces of liquid in theory. That was never directed when he went through security 10 years ago." Okay? 10 years ago, it was more likely that you would. It's not as likely. Are there people that go through there and with undetected things? Absolutely, absolutely. So nobody is bantering or pointing out or trying to say that there will not be any breaches in security, but it's one of the lines of defense, and we use a multi-layered system to do that. So I'm glad she put the 10 years back to show the relevance of that. Okay.
Our understated humorist just checked in. Well, he's been here, but it's Jim Duke said, "I'm not worried about my number coming up anymore." So he's got that covered. I'm worried about the person across the aisle's number coming up.
Right.
So I'm like, geez.
Exactly.
Yeah, don't fly
Someone had to say it.
Don't fly with losers, Jim, and you'll be fine. Yeah.
Right. That's the old joke. I don't mind if it's a captain's day to die. I just don't want to be with him when it happens.
Right.
And Susan McGlasio says, "I'm listening to the harmonizer during the safety speech." And I appreciate that. That's important. But just for a nanosecond, Susan, if you could not listen to the harmonizer and listen to the safety demonstration, and in particular, watch it. One of the things, as a slight kind of distraction here, one of the things about the safety belt that's really important is that on your car, to undo the seat belt, you push a button. And on our seat belts in the airplane, you have to lift the top of the buckle. And amazingly enough, people say, "Oh, not a problem. I'll remember the difference." Trust me, if there's an emergency and you are really upset and people around you are upset, you need to know how to do it yourself. So practice that while we're doing the demonstration.
Diane has been known in her safety briefing to put in a unique bit of information that if you pay attention and you're the first one to point out, she will give you a $50 bill. So just watch for Diane on your airplane and pay close attention.
Diane never sees a $50 bill.
That represents her annual salary. So, appreciate it when she gives
Pretty
it.
much.
When there are huge storms with severe winds, planes still take off. I took off in the middle of one during our takeoff, and during our takeoff, lightning was right next to us and during the entire liftoff. Very scary, and why not wait for calmer weather? Why not, Eric? What are you doing taking off with lightning right next to you?
Well,
how close was the last lightning bolt that you saw flash, Eric?
Exactly. We're getting the report from the tower on their radar plus our radar, getting a look, and if we have 20 miles on it and the winds are calm going out in the departure path, we're good. And especially at night, that can be miles and miles away, and it looks like it's right on top of you, even if there's no convective activity in your path, and it might be better to leave sooner instead of later.
Well, the next time you're in and around your house and there's a lightning storm around, I want you to go outside. Don't stand in the open. Don't stand under a tree, but watch for a flash of lightning and then count 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 until you hear the thunder. And then multiply it times 1,100, and that will tell you how many feet you were away from that lightning strike. And you'll never get one that's, well, I shouldn't say never, but rarely will you get it inside of a second. So that means at least 1,100 feet. So your perception of the lightning strikes is an illusion. It's, you know, it seems like it's right next door to you. And I had the opportunity to talk to this particular fellow that put this question in there. I wrote and invited him to do a 15-minute coaching call. And this was a particularly bad flight that he was in a smaller regional jet type airplane. And what I got him to explain to me was it was at night. Everything is scarier at night. Everything looks scarier when you have lightning at night. You can't see out, you know, and so that's, you know, it's the scene. It's why we turn out all the lights at Halloween and everybody wears scary makeup and stuff, so that, you know, it gives a more of illusion of fear there. So the last one that I've got here, unless you guys have got any, it's why is it that when there are huge storms with severe winds, the same thing. Okay. So severe weather, what is severe according to your perception is not severe to ours. We are not relying on our judgment alone. As Eric said, we're relying on the tower controllers. We're relying on the weather service. We're relying on weather radar. We're on board our airplane. We can actually turn that stuff on the ground. We can see what our flight path looks like in terms of how clear it is in void of some areas of severe weather. So we can make a lot of informed decisions before we ever leave the ground. And I don't know about Eric, I'm sure he probably has some, but I have actually paused my departure at the end of the runway, and there were 4 airplanes waiting behind me. And as soon as I said, no, we're not going to go, and they offered the opportunity to clear the next person for takeoff, everybody was like dominoes. Everybody said, nope, I'm going with the lead airplane here. So we make decisions. We alter our flight path. We alter our decisions as to whether to fly or not, based on our training, our experience, and the equipment and the services that we have available. So take that, all of you weary flyers.
And I think it's really important to just have that statement there that there is no flying through thunderstorms, because that is obviously another one of those perceptions that you know, can come up, and that's really important, that nobody is flying through a thunderstorm in a commercial airliner. So
as they say, there are old pilots and there are bold pilots, but there are no old bold pilots.
We have,
all right.
Just as a little side, this morning we were in Redmond, Oregon, and talking about the safety aspect and what the pilots, how they take care of us all. We were very early in the morning. Our flight was leaving at 5:18 in the morning from Redmond. It was cold. It was probably about 35 degrees. The wings were wet, but not iced. We got on, we closed the door. We were getting ready to go. Plane next to us pushed back, and they decided to get they needed to be de-iced. And then they sat there for a while. And so they were in our way, so we could not push back. And in the interim, the temperature dropped about 2 degrees. And so what was wet on the wings, iced. And so we made the pilots made a bad decision. We're looking out, we're going to be safe. So we needed to wait for the de-icing truck to come back and to take care of us before we left. So we're not going anywhere unless it's safe.
So in the next 201 course, or shortly, the next webinar, we're going to talk about why airplanes crash, and we're going to talk about human factors. The good news is we have 2 pilots on every airplane, at least. The bad news is we have 2 pilots on every airplane. However, the better news about that is we have spent the last 30 years working on human factors so that we have increased the safety margin more and more. I started the show tonight by saying that it's been 20 years since we've had a fatal crash in the United States, and it's largely because of technology and human factors. And we'll talk about that in the course. You can find out a lot more about that. And I always contrast that. When we started our program and we started to show measured success in teaching pilots how to be more responsible and better team players, the medical community started to look at that, medical industry, and it's estimated that between 100,000 and 400,000 people every year die as a result of a medical mistake in a hospital or a medical facility. And so just use that for comparison. And that's why they were interested in what our human factors program was all about, and have subscribed to that to improve their own patient safety. So that's all we've got for this week, unless any closing remarks, Eric?
No, I think we did it. We're only 20 minutes over. We're doing really well.
Okay. Okay. So thanks.
Since 3 o'clock this morning, so I'm ready for bed.
Yeah, me too. So thanks, everybody. And we hope that you found this interesting and informative. Let us know. Keep your cards and letters coming. Let us know what you want to talk about, because that's what we're here for. So good night to everybody. Good night to the group here. And remember, keep flying. It's good for the economy and it's good for us. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.